evening. It didn't take me 2 weeks to post this video. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. I recorded this video like 2 weeks ago and I didn't like it. So I said I was going to re-record it, but then school started and my ass belongs to the quarter system now. So I haven't gotten back around to re-recording it till right now. But that's okay because there is no schedule here. The schedule is, whenever God decides I'm free from my shackles.
I need to learn to shut the fuck up. Midterms just kicked my ass.
Should I be doing homework right now? Probably. Am I? No, because I'm going to talk about what is currently one of my favorite Warhammer books, and fittingly, the first one I ever read. Do I possibly have, like, nostalgia rose-tinted goggles about this? Probably. Maybe. Do I care? No, I don't, and I love it. I'm going to talk about this book today. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Watchers of the Throne, The Regent's Shadow by Chris Wright. And this is the very first Warhammer book I ever read back in December of 2023, and I know what you're thinking. That's the second book in a two-part series. Yes, it is, and I didn't know that at the time, so this is the first one I ever read. Before we begin, I want to quickly get some stuff out of the way. Spoiler warning, obviously, I'm going to be talking about the plot loosely. I'm going to try not to give away all of, like, the really big stuff, but I really can't avoid talking about plot when I'm talking about a lot of the aspects of any of the novels I'm going to be going over, so if you haven't read this yet, maybe don't watch this video. But if you really don't care about spoilers, then I'm happy you're here, or if you've already read it, then maybe you will agree with what I have to say in this coming review. So the next thing is that everything I say is purely my opinion, and it's based off of my own preferences, when that comes down to, like, tropes and writing style and pacing and all that stuff. So take it with a grain of salt. I'm just talking about my personal experience and what I thought. I'm also not very well versed in Warhammer lore. This is, like, barely over a year in now, and I've stopped reading the Lexiconum because I find that reading directly from the book is honestly the best way for me to learn, because Lexiconum, while it is a useful tool, it does cut out a lot of, like, the meat, I guess you would say, the stuff that would help me interpret it the way I would interpret something, or, you know, there's things that they just skim over because they're not important to whatever character I'm reading, but maybe they're important to the plot of the book, or maybe they're important to another character that I don't know about. I just don't think I know things until I've read them from the direct source. So if I get anything wrong, it's not because I am trying to, it is because I don't know and I'm trying not to know. If I get something so vehemently wrong, instead of referring me to the Lexiconum, if you could tell me what book it's in, I would love to read that book. So please, you know, comment it down below like, hey, this is not correct, but if you want to learn about it, you should read this book. And I will try to get to it eventually, but as you'll soon learn, I have so many books in the backlog. I'm trying, okay? The last thing is that I'm always critical of everything I read. I think that even if I love something, like absolutely adore it, I should be able to critique it and criticize it. So just because I say, like, oh, this could have been better, that doesn't mean I hate the book. It just means it's, like, something that I noticed while reading it that I think could have been improved on. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think part of, like, liking something or loving something is being able to healthily recognize when it's got faults, so that when someone else points them out, you don't get upset. So like I said, I finished this book back in December of 2023, and honestly, I absolutely devoured this book. I loved this book. I would stay up to unhealthy hours reading this book, as evident by my Snapchat logs. I mean, I can't deny it. It's right fucking there. Stop looking at me. And the reason why I chose this book instead of Outgunned, Vulpin Glory, and Trader's Rock was because of the way my brother sold it to me, which was, and that is where I'm going to pause myself right on there, because I proceeded to ramble on about the wrong thing for a second. I accidentally said Sisters of Battle, and I meant Sisters of Silence. So what I actually was trying to say in this part was that my brother sold me with Custodians and Sisters of Silence being best friends, and I was sold immediately, loved the idea, really wanted to read it, mostly because I knew nothing of the Sisters of Silence, and what little I knew about the Custodians I had learned from the fanon, and was told that they really didn't have any emotions, which I quickly found out wasn't the case in this book. So I'm going to continue this on from here, and if I say Sisters of Battle again, that is just because I think it was 1 a.m. when I recorded this, and I was horribly sleep deprived. Please have mercy on my soul. And because I love the idea of things not having friends, I had to read this book immediately, and I'm very glad I did. Which leads us into how I'm going to be sectioning out this review and all the other reviews like it, which is how I view this book from a reading standpoint, a writing standpoint, and somehow an academic standpoint. Yes, I found something academic to talk about in this damn book. I wasn't trying, okay? I was just minding my own business, and then my brain noticed it, and I couldn't unnotice it. So now you're going to suffer with me on this academic stuff, okay? If I have to have the knowledge, you have to have the knowledge. Like I said, I loved this book, and I have to commend the writer for this, but despite the fact that it's a second book in a two-part series, I actually kind of knew what was going on throughout the whole thing. And I mean that in the way that all the homework that I had to do while reading this wasn't related to the book at all. It was related to, like, general Warhammer lore that I didn't understand. Like, at one point the Minotaurs show up in this book, and everyone was like, oh, the Minotaurs. And I was like, oh, who the fuck are they? Don't worry, I learned, I understand now. It's shit like that, you know? I did look up a synopsis for the first book just because I wanted to know a bit more about what happened, but I wasn't lost about that. They actually do a really good job at the very beginning of setting up everything that happened last book that in a way that didn't feel like exposition to me. It kind of came naturally. So the beginning of the book, we start with Valerian waking up from a big battle. He's injured. We're immediately getting like little bits of lore about custodians and like how unique they are, so they have to be fixed up properly. We get ALEYA's POV where she's talking about like an oath she broke and stuff like that. And the entire time the information's being fed to us in a way that I feel is organic and informative without feeling like an exposition dump. It's slowly built up, but I immediately kind of get a sense of what's going on, even though I haven't read the first book, which is just, it's why I needed to talk about this. Homework was not necessary for reading this book, which is why I think I fell into it so quickly, because I like it when novels start in the middle of action, or I can even like it if a novel starts after the action, so long as it's done correctly, and I think it's done correctly here. And that might be because it's just picking up where it left off from the first novel, but you know, you can still over exposition dump, or you could even under and just like act like everyone should know what happened in the first book, so we're not even going to talk about it. I think this is like the perfect balance of both of those things coming together and just making things make sense. And building off of that, like I said, this book organically taught me about Custodians, Sisters of Silence, and Terran politics, because there's one more POV in here, which I didn't really like at the time, but after looking back, I kind of appreciate it, and that is Jek's POV, who is just a normal Terran politician, and we'll get into why I think her POV works for what we've got going on here. But it was all very fun, and I felt like I learned a lot. And I think this is a perfect example of why I don't like to rely on the Lexiconum for my lore knowledge, or Reddit. Don't rely on Reddit for your lore knowledge, because I think a lot was lost in translation in terms of how custodians are. Like, a lot of fanon is like, oh yeah, custodians, they're all about the emperor and they really don't got no emotions. And that's not true. I think they're like oddly complex, and this book really goes into it, and that's because we get a custodian POV, and I think is Valerian a young custodian? I kind of got the sense he was like on the younger side. I could be entirely wrong and I'm talking out my ass. Does anyone know? Can you please tell me? Is that something that's covered in the first book? And I don't know, maybe I'm just reading it as young, because this is gonna be wild, watching him trying to understand the concept of friendship was really cute. Who's calling a custodian cute? It's me. I'm calling the custodian cute. Me. And as for the Sisters of Silence, knowing nothing about them going into this, they quickly became one of my favorite factions at the end of it. I love them now. I think they're so cool. And I think they're neat. I just think they're neat. Like, I think they make the perfect companion to a custodian. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're custodian sister of silence stories where, like, God, why are these people together? Oh, am I going to see this in Prospero Burns? I'm almost there. I'm almost there. How many books until I get to Prospero Burns? I have it. I've purchased it. I have 5 books of, well, I guess Prospero Burns is number 5. So I have 4 books. No, I have 5. I'm reading Battle for the Abyss. Anyways, side tangent done. I think they're neat, and I really like their relationship, and I'm very excited to see other stories like them. And if you suggest Tithes, I've already watched it. I loved them there too. It only cemented the fact that I really like Custodians and Sisters of Silence when they're together. And I'll get into why in a second. And as for the Terran politics side, because there is a third POV in here that follows Jek, who's a Terran noble. I almost said a terrible noble, but don't worry, I was just about to say that I learned that all Terran nobles are shit, confirmed. Not Jek. Not Jek. But also, all Terran nobles are shit, confirmed. So yeah, I feel like I learned a lot from this book, and gained like a new appreciation for, at the very least, Custodians and Sisters of Silence. Maybe not so much for Terran nobles. Speaking of which, friendship. Friendship is legal in Warhammer! I have tropes that I adore. And I will shamelessly adore them out loud in public. Specifically, hear me out. Don't laugh. I feel like this is a perfect example of a platonic black cat golden retriever relationship. And you're gonna go, which one is which? And hold on to your seat. I think the Sisters of Silence is the black cat, and the Custodian's the golden retriever. If you've read the book, you have to, come on, you gotta agree with me. That's what it is, right? I'm not insane, right? Right? I know it's wild. But if you actually read it, it makes sense. Aelys spends the entire book like, I'm not your friend. You don't even acknowledge me, because she's embarrassed about the fact that he heard her break her oath of silence. And the entire time he's like, are you okay? Do you want to be friends? And even though there's actually not a lot of them like physically talking face to face, the parts where they are, I love it so much. And I really wish there was more. That's like my one criticism, is I wish I had more interaction between them. And honestly, that probably wouldn't be a criticism if I read the first book. I don't know. But if it is like they had way more interaction in that first book to the point where it doesn't matter as much in this book, I will retroactively take that criticism back. Or maybe I won't, because maybe I just want to see more of them talking, damn it. There was a bunch of little things that made this friendship feel so to me. You know, did you hear my knuckles crack? Because they cracked quite violently when I did that. That's how much I love this friendship. It was Valerian struggling to understand how to be friends with her and just understand friendship in general, to the point where Valoris himself was like, that's your friend, isn't it? He was like, friends? Me? Nah. No. The only friendship I have is the radiation I receive every time I go into the Emperor's throne room. And Valoris knew. He totally knew. And he didn't care. So you know what that tells me? It is completely okay for them to be friends. So I'm grabbing on and I'm holding tight, because I need at least one friendship to be alive in this fucking galaxy. There was one scene between them that I honestly adore. And it's when Valerian gives Ayla his knife. And even though I didn't know much about Custodians, I can't remember at what part of the book it did it. I can't remember if it did it before or after or during. But they made sure to make note of the fact of how important of a gift this was. Like how this knife, each custodian weapon is formed for them and only them. So Valerian giving his knife to Ayla is obviously a big thing. It was just the unique way they went about showing the friendship in this, with Valerian being like, I want to be your friend, but also I don't have friends, no one look at me. Well, she was like, I don't want to be your friend, but internally she was like, I would be open to friendship with you. And you know what? I loved it. And that's why I was so fucking pissed when they didn't stick together at the end. What do you mean he goes off on a crusade and she stays home? I think I'm gonna lose my fucking mind! There needs to be a part 3. And I swear to God, if GW kills one of them off screen or in another book, I will riot. I simply will ignore canon. Canon does not exist. You know what? GW said canon can be whatever I want it to be. And my canon is that Valerian and ALEYA are friends. And they didn't go nowhere. Now I spent all this time talking about friendship because friendship is what sold me on this book. I will say there's also actually like a whole ass mystery and like political intrigue going on in the background. And I am not a big fan of political intrigue, so that's not what was keeping me here. I'm gonna be entirely honest with you. However, I did enjoy it. Sometimes I got a little bit like antsy, but that was only because it was in a POV that I didn't care much about. I'm so sorry, Jack. But overall, I think that intrigue built up to a good twist. At least, it was a good twist because it got me. I didn't see it coming. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe I just don't see things. Did you see this twist coming? Like, I mean, did you see the scale of the twist coming? I didn't see the scale of the twist, okay? I also think the action was really good in this book. I love seeing, how custodians fight from their POV. I think it's kind of funny that they time themselves. Like the little game aspect of it I always enjoy. And because I was so invested in the friendship of this novel, I spent the entire time genuinely afraid because I thought friendship was illegal in Warhammer. So I really honestly was convinced that one of these two was gonna die by the end. And I was wrong. I was wrong. And that just makes my little heart happy. So it helped me for a lot of reasons, and it was beyond just like the reason that was initially sold to me, but I recognize that I talked mostly about the friendship because that was the reason I read the book. There are also some other bits in there that I think a more lore-inclined reader would have been really excited about. Like, this is very, very start of the Indominus Crusade, so if you're a Gilliman fan, you know, he shows up in there. Like I said, the Minotaurs. There was Trajan Valoris, which it was cool seeing him. And I did a little bit of reading on him because he showed up, and it was like, oh, this guy's important. What did he do? And I was like, oh, he's the guy. And then, you know, the appearance of the Phalanx, which I also had to read about, but I think that's also part of the reason why it took so many, because like I said before, you have to do a little bit of lore homework to understand everything that's going on. That's my lore homework. I just wanted to understand what the cool things were. And that really covers everything that I felt personally while reading this book, but what about the writing of this book? So this whole book's in first person, and I really liked that. It was very fun. It felt like it was an interview being done by a remembrancer, which reminded me of like the whole concept of the books being retellings from remembrancers. I don't know if that's still true, but that's like what I've been told. And even though I was wholeheartedly here for ALEYA and Valerian, I liked Jack's POVs too, even though I read it really fast to get through to the other chapters. And what I really love about first-person POV is that you have a lot more flexibility with inner thoughts and characterization when you're using first-person POV, which I think only served to further build up these characters in a, not a unique way, but in a way that made them feel different from one another. Like, I could tell the difference between Valerian, ALEYA, and Jack's voices, even though most of their inner thoughts start with I. And like I said in the reading section, I'm not a big fan of political intrigue. I really don't seek out political intrigue. Political intrigue finds me, but I liked this a lot here. And I think this is because a lot of the intrigue I've read is done with dramatic irony. And if you don't know what dramatic irony is, it's when we, the readers, know everything that's gone on, or like we know the context of the whole situation while the characters don't. And that kind of feels frustrating to me because I like the challenge of figuring things out with the characters, but also if I see they're going to do something that is obviously a bad idea, especially with the knowledge I have, and if I think, like, you know, if you just took 2 more seconds to look at the situation, you would be able to find it out too. It just overall makes it a very unpleasant experience, because I'm sitting here like, you know, if they just sat down and stared at this blaring problem for 2 more seconds, they would know what I would know. Which means they wouldn't be in the situation they're about to be in. And then they get put in that situation. I'm like, oh my god, they're dumb. They're just stupid. It's unsatisfying. And I want to be satisfied, which is why I like how this is done without dramatic irony. You don't know what's going on. You know fuck all, in fact. And knowing fuck all just makes the experience better for me. Like, I'm learning everything that the characters are learning in time with them, and I think it just only serves to build up that twist at the end more. Whether or not it was a good twist or a bad twist that I should have seen coming, I'll leave up to you. Maybe I'm the character who should have taken 2 more seconds to look at the situation, and then I would have known. But either way, I think it was best done without dramatic irony in this sense. And I just want to take a moment now to recognize Jack, because I didn't talk about her really at all in the reading section. And I think she plays a very important role in the writing section. Because whereas ALEYA and VALERIAN are basically weapons of mass destruction, she's a normal fucking person in all of this. I think it adds an extra layer of, like, stakes and danger to see a normal person trying to get through all the bullshit happening here, and trying to solve the mystery as well alongside these two. But it wasn't only that. ALEYA and VALERIAN, while trying to solve this mystery and this intrigue, they were like the confident confused. Jack was just the confused. Her demeanor and POV and actions set up the twist really well. And I think it just adds to, like, the tension of the story overall, because whereas I wasn't fully afraid for VALERIAN and ALEYA, like, especially not VALERIAN. I was kind of, like, confident that if anyone was going to make it out of this book, it was probably going to be the custodian. Jack I was always scared for. I was always afraid she was going to, like, ask the wrong question, poke her nose in the wrong place, and then end up dead. And I think you need that good balance of tension to add stakes to the story. There needs to be at least one person that I'm absolutely certain at some point might not make it out of this. And overall, I think all 3 of those POVs together really work well to balance out the different perspectives that you could take in solving this mystery. And in, I guess, not the way that it's taken seriously, but the way it's treated. Whereas VALERIAN is like, this is every other Tuesday. Ayla's like, this is kind of an annoying Tuesday. Jack is like, God, this fucking sucks. But I keep talking about that twist. And here's the thing. I liked the twist. But the more I think about it, the more I can't help but be like, ooh, that was really convenient. If you know what I'm talking about. That was really convenient. The only way that I have been able to, and this is where we're getting to, like, I'm towing the line on the spoilers in this one. The only way that I think you could justify how convenient that was just by saying Gilliman is, like, that big brain and he just plans that far ahead. It still bothers me, though. But not enough to hate this book. It's just one of those moments where I became lucid while reading. I was like, damn, if this, and this didn't happen, how would we even get to the proper ending that they wanted in this book? I'm sure there's a bunch of other contingencies. Maybe it's just because this was my first ever Warhammer book and I haven't experienced much of Gilliman or, like, anything, but it felt really, really convenient for me. So that was, like, just, like, one of the few things that drew me out of the book when it comes to the writing. The other thing, which I think is a very cold topic issue, was the power scaling. I know that this is a, like, argument or conversation that's had every other week, but if it's something that comes up for a first-time reader, I think it's something that needs to be brought up for anyone else who's going to be a first-time reader trying to get into Warhammer as well. And that is, like, it's really hard to tell how powerful some factions are supposed to be lore-wise. Like, maybe this is just another case of fanon blowing things out of proportion, but I don't think it is. I think they're legitimate stories that back up what I'm going to say. Because custodians are supposed to be basically one-man armies. So that makes me ask, how powerful are minotaurs? Because 2 working together kill 1 custodian. He was a tabletop custodian for a moment, I guess. And I could be wrong about this. I think it was actually acknowledged in lore that because they've been out of the fight for 10k years now, they're just a teensy bit rusty, but rusty enough to lose to 2 space marines, no matter how juiced up they are. Or, alternatively, it could be, like, one of those things of, oh, you know,
no matter how good you are, you can die to chance. So maybe that custodian got capped by chance. Yeah, it was just two of those like little moments making me go, are you sure about that? But I don't know. But these were the two I was most unsure about because I wasn't sure if there's like genuine lore explanations for them. And this is the one time I'm gonna make an exception for my rule. If you can just tell me like, yes, you are correct, or no, you're wrong. It's basically this in the lore. That's okay. I imagine these are too broad of topics to just point me to a book to say, just go read that and you'll understand. And yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on the writing, which means I get to talk about how the fuck I pulled something academic out of this. Batten down the hatches, boys. She's about to info dump on your ass. Something that crossed my mind while I was reading this was the importance of I in first-person POV. Now, some people prefer first-person to third-person, and vice versa. And you might hear every once in a while that someone prefers first person because when they read the word I, they picture it as themselves, which is a lot more common than you think. It's just maybe you don't think about it on a conscious level, more of a subconscious level. One of the most important effects of reading I is how intimate it is because, like I said, you associate I with yourself. It directly slots you in to what that character is feeling and experiencing in that moment. And I think that was important for this story because it's kind of about rebuilding. You know, the custodians are trying to rebuild after all of the damage done by the Chaos Incursion. Sisters of Silence are literally trying to rebuild their order. And then you have the Terran politics trying to rebuild everything because of the massive shuffle that's happened because Regent Gilliman is here. And all the while, you know, they're trying to sort through their emotions, they're trying to sort through everything that's happened to them, and they're trying to solve this intrigue and mystery at the same time. It just makes the overall story more immersive, and it makes the characters more relatable. I don't know if I would have liked this book as much if it were third person. Maybe I would have. I don't have a problem with either POVs, but I will fully admit that so far, this is kind of the most connected I've been to a Warhammer book. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it was in first-person POV. And I really think the story was made for first-person POV. And in my notes here, I have a couple of quotes written down because I think they were the ones that really connected with me, or they made me feel or realize something. For example, the more I studied him, the more I was convinced that Valerian's deduction was right. Or, after that, I became suspicious of Talam. And if I closed my eyes, I might have been back there again, under the shadow of the beast. I chose the first two because I think they played into my own personal deduction while I was trying to solve this mystery alongside the characters. When a character became convinced of something, whether I tried to or not, I mildly became convinced of something. And it was because of the conviction of that I statement. As for the last one, I think just having that I statement really brought me closer to the emotion and memory of that character. All of these things, as you can tell, they're all just kind of building up to the fact that I was able to connect more to the story, and I felt like I was interacting with it more, and that is because of the first person I POV. And I really bring this up because, you know, if you're a fledgling writer, I think choosing POV is very, very important. So really think about how you want to have your audience interact with that story and connect to that story. And if you are just kind of a reader, look back on the books you've read and see if that POV that you read it from affected how you connected with it. I think it's just a nice little thought exercise to kind of give you an idea of what you like to read and how you like to connect to it, as well as how you want others to connect to it. And that covers everything. So I'm going to wrap us up with my personal recommendations on this book. Do I recommend this book for first-time readers? No, because it's the second in the series, and if you've just heard of Warhammer and you want to start reading Warhammer, don't start with this book. Maybe you could start with the first one. I haven't read it yet, so I actually can't say yes or no. But really just don't start with this one. Like I said, Second book in the series. If you don't know any lore, I don't think it's going to be as interesting or as investing as it was for me. If you're familiar with Warhammer lore, but you're a first-time reader, yes, but I would still recommend the first one first, even though I haven't read it. I have a feeling it's probably as good as this one. But if you see this in a store and you're like, you know what, I want to read it right now, it'll be completely fine. I think you'll be able to understand what's going on and follow along. As for everyone else, yes, read it. Please read it. It was good, okay? It was really good. I had a fun time. I got my Custodian and Sister of Silent fix. It does well to scratch oh, that's a cool Warhammer thing, people in place itch. I think it's just written, and I just want someone else to know that Warhammer allows friendship, and it's a good friendship, damn it. If you read this book, did you like it? Do you even agree with anything I said in this review? Tell me in the comments down below. I always like to hear different opinions, especially if someone interprets something completely differently than how I interpreted it, because I just think it's really cool to see how someone else's experiences and like the way their mind works processes information differently from my own. But yeah, overall, I had a great time. This was 1 out of 9 in 1 year, so we got 8 more to go, and honestly, I don't know if I'm gonna finish book 10 by the time I talk about all of these books, because good lord, is Battle for the Abyss ass!